Hello viewers, welcome to the channel. Today we are going to discuss an important concept in web technology called CSS, which stands for Cascaded Style Sheet. What for this cascaded style sheets are used? Basically for designing the layouts and styling of the content present in the web document. How do we style them? Using the properties to name a few, such as background color, setting the font family, setting the text colors, etc. All these properties are defined on the elements of the web document, which is basically written using your HTML tags or HTML language, right? So in detail, today's session, we will be concentrating on how CSS works and what are the different ways in which a CSS can be defined, right? There are three different types of CSS that can be used in defining or in designing the web pages. Number one, inline CSS. Number two, internal CSS, or we also call the same as embedded CSS. And the final one, we call it as external CSS, right? So there are three options for us, using one of which or a combination of all the three, we can design our web pages. Now, when do we use inline CSS? Inline CSS is basically used to design a specific content residing within the element, right? So wherever locally you want to apply certain styles, we can go for using inline CSS, and the scope of inline CSS is limited to the element within which it is defined, right? Priority wise, among all the three, inline CSS has got highest priority. Okay, but the scope is limited to the element in which it is defined. Now, how do we define an inline CSS? We need to know the syntax of it. So, the inline CSS is always defined using an attribute called style attribute, right? And this style attribute has to be associated with any one of the HTML elements, right? So in general, element represents a HTML tag and style represents the attribute using which you are styling this element. Okay, so now within this, style equal to the property that you want to set, its name colon the value. How many ever properties you want to define, you can list here continuously, separated by semicolon. Finally, close the double quotes and then close your element, right? An example of this could be, I want to set the font color of a paragraph element. So paragraph is my element defined using P. I say I want to define the color of the text, so for which I require style. So the syntax I'm going to follow and say the property is going to be the color. The value I'm going to give it as red. That's it, right? So how we are going to define an element on which the inline CSS is to be defined, and it always starts with a style attribute equal to operator within quote marks, define your property and value that you want to apply to your element. Okay, so this is how a inline CSS can be applied, and this color, the text color, is applied only to this particular paragraph, not to any other tags. Okay, so this is how an inline CSS is defined. In continuation, we will see how to implement the same example in live, right? So how do I implement it? I need to nest my CSS in a HTML document. So for that, I am starting to write the HTML document, which basically starts with the root element called HTML. It has got two sections wherein first one to follow is head, which can have a title saying inline demo. I just close my title, close my head section. I start with the body because it is there where I want to define my content using paragraph element. I say with this, I want to style the text to be of red color, right? So I close off my body because I am not interested in anything else. So I close off my HTML and save this document as inline CSS dot HTML. The extension would remain as HTML only. So now after I have saved it, I go to the place where I have saved that file and just double click on it. It is taking a couple of seconds to open it up. So we should be knowing that there would be no content displayed because I have not defined any content for the paragraph as of now, right? So yes, there is no content displayed. So how do I display it? I say the message hello world, and then I close my paragraph tag. So if there are no errors, it should work fine for me. I just rerun it. I get it at the display here. And similarly, if I want to change the color from red to green, you can observe the same change. Any change you'd make, you remember to save the file and then execute the color changes to green. So this is how you can use your inline CSS whose scope is defined to be inside this element, right? If you write another paragraph, it would not be affecting it, right? Say hello, listeners, right? There won't be absolutely any styling done to it. Save it, execute it. So it is in black color, which is a default color. If I want to apply a color to it, I have to go for defining another style using an inline CSS color red. Save it, execute it, the color changes. So this is how you can define style for any of the elements for the required properties as per your application demands. Further, moving on with our second type of CSS, that is internal CSS, also known as embedded CSS, right? So the internal CSS is again used to define the styles, but the difference being the scope. The internal CSS has a wider scope as in comparison with your inline CSS. Basically, the internal or external CSS are defined using selectors. What these selectors are will be dealt in the next video. For time being, in the examples to be followed and to have the understanding of how CSS are defined, I will be demonstrating only with the usage of element selectors, right? So need not worry at this point in time about the selectors. Okay, just remember internal CSS or external CSS are defined over selectors, and what they are, we shall be seeing them shortly. So the syntax for internal CSS. So where do we define these CSS, internal CSS? We define the internal CSS using a tag or an element called a style inside the web document. So inside the opening and closing of the style element, we are going to have the definitions for the stylers. Say for example, I want to style for an element called paragraph. So how do I define it? I take the name of the paragraph tag, which is defined as P, open it up with a curly braces, define the properties. Property 1 colon value 1. Separator is semicolon. Property 2 value 2. Likewise, n number of properties I can define for the tag. Similarly, I can define another set of properties for a tag called body, which is a tag of HTML language. So again, property 1 value 1, that is how many ever properties you want to define over body element, you can define over here. In this case, the P and body that I call here are known as your element selectors, right? The difference that you can note in the syntax for internal CSS and inline CSS is that here style becomes the element and not the attribute of an element, which was in case of our inline CSS. Now through an example, we will see how we can write our internal CSS. Coming to the demonstration of internal CSS, I need to write the HTML syntax. So HTML head, then I have title, say internal CSS demo. Then I can write my style here in the head section. It is not mandatory, but it is always considered to be a better option. So I define my style here. So I prefer styling for an element called H1, where I want to set the font size font size to 40px and color of the text to be red. Similarly, I want to define another element P and say its color to be blue. I want to align it center. Right? These are the two things I want to do. So I have defined the internal CSS on two elements H1 and P, and then I have completed it. So hence I close my style element. Now I start defining the body section where I need to represent some content using H1 and P elements. Only then these styles will be applied over those elements. So first H1, I say welcome. I close my H1. I define P, say we are doing good. So this is my content for both the elements. So after which I'm going to just close my body and close the HTML root element. I just need to save this as internal css.html. Do not forget the extension is HTML. Now, if there is no error in my code, I should be getting the output, right? So I'm just double clicking on it. I should be getting the output any moment. Yes, you can observe here the H1 font. Okay, we could not make out if it is increased or no. So let me just check and change this to say, okay, let me not use font size. Let me make it as font weight. Okay, or style. And style is equal to italic. Let me just check this. Save, refresh. You can observe now that both the properties which was defined on H1, that is the font style to be of italic and color to be red, are applied to this, and the paragraph tag I had just defined the color, right? Oh, I also had defined align, right? So it is not working. So the text property is text align. Save it and now check. Yes. So this clearly indicates that the basic requirement for one to use an internal CSS is you need to be perfect with the property names and the values that are permissible to be assigned to those properties. If there is a slight error, be it with spelling or with the cases, the results will not be observed. Okay? Coming to the last type of CSS, that is external CSS. How do we define these? The procedure is slightly changing here. That is, we require two files, one having my HTML elements defined, and the second one is the CSS file containing all the styles. So the corresponding file names will have extensions as .html and .css. Now how these two files are linked, because they both are defined separately. So how do I link them? I use an element called link with two attributes called rel and href. Sorry, it is href. Right? What are the values for these? Your rel will have style sheet as a value, and your href will have the path to the file. Okay, so along with the file name and extension. So this is the key to have the association built between your HTML and CSS. Okay, so now a simple demonstration of the same we will see, and before we go to that, the scope and priority we shall discuss quickly. The scope for external CSS is the highest as compared to inline and internal, whereas priority is the lowest in comparison. Okay, so for the scope wise, it is the highest scoped CSS, priority it is the lowest. Remember this. Okay, why do I say this? The scope is highest because a single CSS file that you have defined can be used by just linking or associating it with multiple HTML documents, right? You just write once, link them in your HTML files, you're able to use these styling in multiple pages, right? This is how the implementation goes for CSS, we will check that through a simple example. For the example, let me first have the HTML document on which I require to write the CSS. Title, external CSS demo. Close off my head. And here itself, I can have my link. I need to have two attributes defined, rel, which has got style sheet as a value, and then I'll be naming the CSS file to be demo. So I'm just writing it just directly here. So if you are not using the same name, whatever is the name used by you for defining the CSS, the same name has to be written here. Okay. So I'm not going to write any of the styling here. Rather, I'm just having this link. Right. So I will be writing only the elements on which I want to apply these styles. So for example, I am using H1, say welcome, right? And I have some content defined in paragraph tag, right? This is a simple example to demonstrate the usage of external CSS 1, right? I just close off body and then close off the HTML. So I have not opened the body here. So let me do that. These are all the basic things. Now, the first part, that is extern.html is the file name, right? So the first part, that is the requirement, that is HTML document is now ready. I need to have another, that is CSS file. So to do that, I need to open up a new file, and the content that I want to define here is the style, and basically I have used two elements, H1 and P, in my document. So let me write stylings for these two. H1, I just want it to be center aligned, right? Align center, and color to be red. That's it. For the paragraph, I want font family to be Cambria. Font size to be 40px, and then just close this, right? I am going to save this as demo.css, which is the file name I had given in the HTML document, right? So once this is done, I need to go to the location where the file is saved, right? And I need to execute this HTML file. If there is no error, I should be getting the output, else we need to debug it. So I have not it to, yes, we just now got this, right? So the paragraph details are applied, the font size is applied, and the font family is changed from Times New Roman to Cambria, but H1, the alignment has not happened. So let me just quickly check. Okay, text align. Oh, not this. I need to have colons. Save this. Refresh. Yes. align, save, save, refresh. Yes, this was the output that I wanted here, right? So this is how you can write the HTML tags separately in a file and the the styling component in a separate file and still be able to associate them and use them as per your requirement, right? Now the same external CSS that has been defined here, you can apply it for another HTML document wherein I was trying to demonstrate that a single CSS can be applied on multiple web documents, right? So a simple demonstration of the same HTML, quick head section, closing and opening. Okay, I am not interested in writing anything within this. So let me quickly define body and let me quickly have h1 and say file 1. This is from file 2, right? So h1 and paragraph, I just say from second file. This is just to see that same CSS that was defined previously is getting applied here. So how do I do that? I just need to have a link here. So what is the tag? Link, rel, style sheet, and then href equals demo.css. Save this. This is extern1.css. Let me quickly run that. Extern1.cs. Oh, I did not save this properly. It has to be with extension HTML, which I missed out. I guess you have observed it. HTML, save it quickly, get back, execute this. So it's good that I am committing some of the mistakes which usually all of us do, right? And if you observe such mistakes, you know what is the ratification that you're supposed to do, right? This is the output wherein the heading is red in color and is center aligned, and the paragraph content is with the font family set to Cambria and the font size set to 40 px. That's all for types of CSS.